We're going to start the second half of Chapter 9 with solving quadratics by factoring. Please hit pause, do the 5 warm-ups, and then hit play to see the answers. Okay, for the first one, you should have had x equals -3. Number 2, added 4 and got x equals 4. Number 3, x equals 3 halves. For number 4, when you factored it, remember what multiplies to be x, and x. You can make your little chart for x squared, so x and x. Then your factors of -8 that add to be +2. So I would do +4 and -2. So there's x plus 4 and x minus 2. For the third one, x, because that's your factors of x squared. What multiplies to be 5 and adds to be 6? If you look at the factors of 5, well, there's only 1 and 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. There goes positive, plus 1, plus 5. Well, now I just have a little question for you. If the product of two terms, so if I have a times b equals 0, what do I know about either a or b? Well, you know that either a equals 0 or b equals 0. Because you could have a times 0 equals 0 or 0 times b equals 0. Regardless, anything times 0 is 0. So thinking along the same lines, if the product of two quantities, so quantities would be two binomials. So let's suppose that I have a plus b and c plus d equals 0. What do we know about at least one of these quantities? Either this has to equal 0, and then you have 0 equal 0 times c plus d equals 0, which if you distributed your 0, you have 0 times c is 0, plus 0 equals 0, 0 equals 0, or c plus d could equal 0 for the same reasoning. So you almost have two equations. A plus b could equal 0, or c plus d could equal 0. So let's try that out. It says solve each quadratic by factoring. So the first thing that you're going to do is factor. So the first thing is factor your trinomial. So I'm going to take x squared minus 6x plus 8, the factors of x squared are x and x, whole thing equals 0. What multiplies to be +8 and adds to be negative, well, they both have to be negative. How about -2 and -4? So for the whole thing to equal 0, the second thing that you do is set each binomial equal to 0. So what I mean by that is you could have either x minus 2 equals 0 or x minus 4 equals 0. If either binomial equals 0, the whole thing would equal 0. Step 3 is to solve each equation. So if I solve each equation, I would add 2, x equals 2, or add 4, x equals 4. So that means that these are my zeros of the quadratic. You can even think about the graph at 2 and 4. What that means is 1, 2, 3, 4. You now know, and a is 1, so a is opening up. You know that your graph looks something like this. And you can check that. If you plug this into your equation, 2 squared minus 6 times 2 plus 8, does it equal 0? So step 4 is to check. You'd have 4 minus 12 plus 8 equals 0. 4 minus 12 is -8 plus 8 is 0 equals 0. And it would work. And the same thing would happen for the other one. So your answers are x equals 2 or x equals 4. Let's try number 2. Now number 2, the first thing you have to do is set the equation equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract 12x and get x squared minus 12x equals -36. Add 36 to get x squared minus 12x plus 36 equals 0. Now, we're at step 1. We can factor the trinomial that we have a trinomial. X and x will multiply to be positive 36 and add to be negative 12. Well, negative 6 and negative 6. Because they are the same, how many equations do you actually have? You could have x minus 6 equals 0 or x minus 6 equals 0. But at the end of the day, when you add 6 to both sides, there's only really one answer, x equals 6. What that means for your graph, if you were drawing a little sketch, is you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. A is positive, so it's opening up like that. You know that it has 1, 0, it lands right on the x-axis, and it's opening up. All right, let's add this number 3 on here. You can either add it at the top or the bottom. If you have x squared minus 6x equals 0. Now we have a binomial, so you can't factor it like that because it's a binomial. So the first thing you look for is a GCF. The only way you can do that is if it's a difference of 2 squares, which this is not. So in this case, you have a GCF of x. So remember, it's always GCF times your leftovers. So I divided by x, and I got x times the quantity x minus 6 equals 0. So we get x equals 0 or x minus 6 equals 0. Add 6, x equals 6. So your two answers are x equals 0, 6. Let's look at number 4. First thing you need to do is go ahead and factor it. What multiplies to be 49 and adds to be 14? Well, positive 7 and positive 7. Notice they're the same factor, so you're going to have 1, 0. You could just say x plus 7 equals 0, subtract 7, and get x equals negative 7. That just means it touches your x-axis in one place. For number 5, there's no GCF, it's a binomial. So first thing you do is check for GCF. Nope. Then remember to check to see if it's a difference of 2 squares. And yes, it is. So when it's a difference of 2 squares, remember you have x plus the square root of 25 is 5, and x minus 5. We know we're going to have 2 zeros here because there are 2 different factors. So x plus 5 equals 0, or x minus 5 equals 0. So subtract 5, x equals negative 5, add 5, x equals positive 5. So x equals negative 5 or x equals positive 5. If you substituted those in, you get 0. Number 6, this time, there's no GCF, but I'm going to factor by slide and divide. So I'm going to multiply by 6 and get x squared plus 11x minus 60. So I'm going to think what multiplies to be negative 60 and adds to be positive 11. Make sure that you keep writing equals 0. That is very important because you can't solve for something if you don't have it equal to something. So you know it's x and x. So let's go through the factors of negative 60. Well, you know you have negative 1 times 60, that's not going to equal 11. Negative 2 times 30, that's not going to equal 11. Negative 3 times 20, nope. Let's try 4 out. 4 times 15, negative 4 times 15 equals negative 60. Oh, that equals 11. So we found it. So negative 4, positive 15. Remember, because you multiplied by 6, you know how to divide both by 6 and simplify. So you get x minus, each are divisible by 2, 2/3, times x plus, both are divisible by 3, 5 halves, equals 0. Kick up the bottom, the denominators, and you get 3x minus 2 times 2x plus 5 equals 0. You could have done this by guess and check as well, but I think slide and divide is a little easier. So then when you sub it in and you have 3x minus 2 equals 0, add 2 to both sides, 3x equals 2, divide by 3, x equals 2/3, or x plus 5 over 2 equals 0. Oh, sorry. 2x plus 5 equals 0. Subtract 5, 2x equals negative 5. Divide by 2, x equals negative 5 halves. So you have your two answers there. Now, number 7, I'm going to go ahead and erase this, so if you need to hit pause and make sure if you are still writing it down. Let's look at number 7. Again, we're going to do it by slide and divide. Take 2, slide it over, and you get x squared plus 5x minus 6 equals 0. This one's a little easier to factor. We did the harder one first. We have x and x. What multiplies to be negative 6? It has to be positive 5. Well, how about negative 1 times positive 6? Well, that works. Since we slid 2, divide by 2. So you get 2x minus 1 times x plus 3, all equals 0. Solve each equation. So you have 2x minus 1 equals 0, or x plus 3 equals 0. When you solve your equations, you get x equals 1/2, or x equals negative 3. Now these can all be used for a lot of these are used for making parabolas, people diving, people jumping. This says the height in feet above the water a diver is modeled by h of t, and I'm going to go ahead and write it down. H of t, the height, this stands for the height, where t is the time, equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 8. Now, because a is negative, here's kind of a picture. You have your water here, you have your diver. He's going up and coming down. So it would make sense that a is negative. Jumps off the platform. Find the time it takes for him to reach the water. So I want to know, think about what is your height when it reaches the water? The height would be 0. So I went ahead and I said 0 equals negative 16t squared plus 8t plus 8. Then I went and, oh, I noticed there's a GCF in here. So I can divide everything. There's a GCF that equals 8. So I divided everything by 8, the left and the right. 0 equals negative 2t squared plus t plus 1. But would you like that first term to be negative? Probably not. So I'm going to go ahead and divide everything by negative 1. So divide by negative 1. So the first term is positive to factor. So when I do that, I get 0 equals positive 2t squared minus t minus 1. Now, because 2 is positive, or 2 is prime, I'm going to go ahead and use guess and check. I'm going to have 2t and t. The only things that can multiply to be negative 1 are positive 1 and negative 1. So I'm going to do negative 1, positive 1, and check. Remember doing it this way. 1t, 2t times negative 1 is negative 2t. That equals negative 1, so we got it factored correctly. If you're doing this on your own and you want to use slide and divide, by all means, do your slide and divide. And when you did your slide and divide, you would just slide the 2 over. And now you have your two equations. You have 2t plus 1 equals 0, or t minus 1 equals 0. So subtract 1, 2t equals negative 1. Divide by 2, t equals negative 1/2. Or add 1, t equals 1. I'm only going to use one of these. I'm eliminating it because you can't have negative time. No negative time. So your answer is t equals 1 second. So it takes him 1 second to reach the pool.